one of the hardest things about teaching the character for sure. But there's a couple key specifics that I think are really important. Obviously, the instant double jump back air and up air are huge because you're able to swing in a way where you're able to immediately act upon landing. Like if I do a full hop up air here, I'm in a lot of lag.
Right.
But if I do an instant double jump, I'm doing it at a full hop height without the lag.
Yeah.
So it's very, very valuable because, you know, this is the kind of the perfect percent where you're not going to be able to neutral air someone off an up throw anymore.
Okay.
So I can go into something like this, where if that during that instant double jump up air, if they double jump, cool. I threatened it. I land on the ground. Now I can position and track them a little bit easier because they used a key resource. And if they air dodge, that's also fine because I'm not going to be at a frame disadvantage.
Okay.
You know, I can go straight into a jab or something if whatever it may be. So that's why that scenario is so valuable because you're able to play in a way where it's like one of the few scenarios where you can swing first, like we've been talking about. Unfortunately, you have to work extra hard to get that privilege, but it's still really important. And same thing applies to something like Shadowflare.
Yep.
Like, if I landed Shadowflare right here, I'd be upset, right? Because as soon as that Shadowflare lands point blank, we're in a weird scrappy scenario. Sephiroth is usually not going to be favored in that situation. I'm not collecting any information from landing the Shadowflare. It's just really ugly. Especially because a lot of the time the value from Shadowflare is just watching your opponent because for a few seconds they have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that tells you so much about the...
Are they going to run away? Are they going to push you away? All that jazz.
It tells you so much about them as a person. Like their behavior throughout the rest of the match, what they're currently afraid of, what they're not afraid of. So even more than landing like a kill or a combo off of it, it's just the fact that there is something on them and they have to deal with it. So you're getting free information. You don't even have to move for those 3 seconds. You know what I mean? It's funny because you worded it in the same way I would word it, where I talk about like, hey, let's say I'm up against X player or X character and I've never played them before. Like, what do I do in these scenarios? So you always have a general idea for things like this, but since it's, you know, a brand new scenario, you don't want to put yourself at too much risk, right?
Right.
So something that's interesting about a move like Shadowflare is because of the low hit stun, they do have the privilege of doing something immediately after.
Okay.
It's kind of something that's similar I do with a banana if I tap them with it while they're airborne as well, where it kind of resets everything. So the first thing I look for is if they press something immediately after. That can be anything, but especially if it's a swing, like, because that just shows, oh, maybe they were pressing that before I even Shadowflared them and they continued to press a button. So that says a lot. That says that they're in a rush and that when they get hit by something like this and they get reset like that and they whiff, that means during that whiff, I can position for something else. Like if you F-tilt as soon as I tap you there, I'm already naring. And you're giving me a really valuable hit that I wouldn't get if you just dropped your controller.
Okay.
So that's the first thing I look for because it's very, very, it's pretty much the same thing as the Falcon scenario where you're giving them an opportunity to think because they're briefly out of hit stun that they're in a good spot. And a lot of players will take that opportunity to press something. So that's the first thing I look for. And the reason why it's worth looking for is even if they don't give you much to work with, you still have a few seconds to, you know, position yourself. Or a lot of Sephiroth players come to me and ask about when they go to the ledge. And as frustrating as that is, right, they can just tank all the hits with the invincibility. It still connects into something we were talking about earlier where now you get to watch the ledge scenario and the corner scenario play out without really doing anything. Which is very valuable, obviously. It's a bit more ambiguous because, you know, when Sephiroth first came out and I would land a Shadowflare, it would be like, oh, like, you know, it's kind of like a switch flipping where it's like, oh, time to go for a crazy moment or like a crazy kill. Like, I have so much advantage. But as the years went by, it's more so like, it's not going to be that simple. It's more about data collection. You know, and if they play so poorly around Shadowflare, you know, you can just take it and get a kill off of it or something like that. But the information is so valuable, obviously.
Nice.
And when it comes to using it, I kind of like to use it like a Joker side B without Arsene. I've said that a million times, but
what does that mean? please.
Yeah. So if I land it point blank like this, I'm not a fan because they might reverse like Sephiroth. It's just not a positive frame advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And most characters are going to have better frame data than Sephiroth, so not only am I in a position where Sephiroth doesn't like to play generally, I also might just get hit. So I like to stay on the move.
Okay.
While I'm shadow flaring. So it's kind of like a perspective. While I'd rather be mobile while using it than hit it point blank.
Oh, so
like I'd rather miss it entirely at that point.
So you like as a general rule, because I'm gonna try and reduce this to general rules, so I'm not overwhelming and unpacking everything all the time. But you wouldn't use this while stationary ever, then? I mean, unless you have like a clear punish or something.
The only time I would release it while stationary is like if I jumped and kept charging it as a mix-up, because a lot of players will kind of play into this cadence where if they're used to you just using the non-charge, they'll start shielding or spot dodging it, and then if you can mix them up by continuing the charge. But a lot of the time I'm doing like a rising one, because even a rising one can go into a double jump, or I'm just, a lot of Joker players when they have no Arsene in their side being, it goes at that like downwards diagonal angle.
Yes.
So there's a bit of that dead zone if they close the gap. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the time they're jumping backwards to consider the scenario after the fact if it doesn't work out. And with Sephiroth, it's the same logic where, if they close the gap or if they jump, like this hitbox is simply just a straight line. Mm-hmm. The counterplay to side B in place is the same counterplay to doing something like this in place.
That's so, what I struggle knowing, like, when should I be tilting versus side B? Because they feel the same range.
You have the privilege of moving. Mm-hmm. So that's why, I'd rather miss it while moving than hit it point blank is always like the general thing, just to really put it into perspective for someone.
Nice.
Because there's just not as much. There's not as much value landing it point blank. And another thing